This is the Louie T Network.
Your man, Louie T, welcome. You are in the NFL Power Grid. And now that you know the format, we're going to speed up the process of this and make it a much more rapid fire program. Don't want to keep you here that long. Instead of me getting into elaborate detail as to why this team is here, we're just going to give you a little bit of background information, where they were a week ago, how they got to where they are this week, and we're going to move on. Not going to spend a lot of time on each individual team. Not as long as we have in the past. We're going to speed this thing up. So here we go. Let's not delay. Let's jump into the NFL Power Grid. Who's hot? Who's cold? Who's up? Who's down? We're about to find out here in the NFL Power Grid. So we start at number 32. It's a new 32. And these teams have been interchanging. One week it's the Raiders, the next week it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now we're back to the Oakland Raiders at 32. Another loss. Tough, hard-fought loss, but a loss nonetheless for the Raiders as they fall to the Arizona Cardinals. They're the only winless team in the league, so they are at 32. You move to 31. It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Here's a team that last week didn't play a game, but because of that beatdown that they suffered before the bye, you knew if someone won underneath them, they could easily slide down, and that's what they did. They're 31. And now, speaking of which, the Jacksonville Jaguars move up to number 30 on the list as they get their first win, in a very convincing one at home over the Cleveland Browns, who were playing hot football. So the Jags are now your 30th team in the league. The Jets did play on Thursday Night Football, hard-fought loss at New England. Hey, they showed up. They made a trade for Percival Harvin. We'll see if that impacts this team greatly moving forward. But right now, they remain at 29. That's where they were a week ago. You go to number 28. It's the Atlanta Falcons. They're down 3 spots from last week's 25th overall rating in the Power Grid. This is a team that is in free fall mode. They're struggling, have lost 4 consecutive games. They can't find their way offensively. They're now the 28th team in the NFL Power Grid. Tennessee Titans come in at number 27. Here's a team in the Titans that were looking to string together their first 2 consecutive game win streak of the season. One last week, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago, they won at home versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Weren't able to get it done on the road versus the Redskins. They're now number 27. They're down a spot from last week. Speaking of the Redskins, they moved up a spot by getting their second win of the season. They now come in at number 26. I just talked about them beating the Titans. Well, those 2 teams flip-flop in the Power Grid. They beat the Titans, so they take the Titans' 26th spot, move the Titans down to 27. We move on to number 25. It's the Minnesota Vikings, down a spot from last week. Couldn't go on the road. Had the Buffalo Bills on the ropes. Let them off the hook. So they drop a slot down from 24 a week ago. They're now 25th. You go on to the New Orleans Saints. Here's a team in the Saints. Could have gotten a huge road victory versus the Detroit Lions. Failed to hold on. This team dominated this game, was up 13 with 5 minutes left in the game, blew a 13-point lead in the final moments of the game. So now they moved down 2 slots from 22 last week to 24. You go to 23, the St. Louis Rams. Look at the Rams pulling out all the stops. Here's a team that had the Super Bowl defending champions on the ropes, let them off the hook, only to re-rope them and get the W. Now, they had to do everything they could on special teams to get it done, but a win's a win's a win's a win in this league. Rams move up a whole 5 slots, all the way up from 28 to 23 in this week's NFL Power Grid. How about the Cleveland Browns? They were the biggest losers in week number 7, dropping a full 7 slots. They were all the way up at 15 last week. They're now all the way down to 22 with that terrible loss on the road to the winless Jacksonville Jaguars. That's not a way to prove that you want to be a contender in your division and in your conference in this league. That's not the way to give them. They're now 22, dropping 7 spots from last week. You move on to the 21st team in the NFL Power Grid. It's the Chicago Bears. The Bears, another home loss. Team has not won a home game all season long. Miami comes in and drubs them in their own building. They move down 4 slots. They were 17th last week. They're now 21st. Bears are a struggling team at home. You move on to number 20 and number 19. Both of these teams did not change from a week ago. 20 are the Texans. They had a tough loss on Monday night. They jumped out to a 13-point lead against the Steelers and weren't able to hold it. As a matter of fact, they watched that lead evaporate in less than 3 minutes. They were down 24-13 after being up 13-0. So they gave up 24 unanswered points in a 3-minute span. Yikes. They're still number 20. And number 19, Giants go on the road, lose to the Cowboys. Put up a heck of a fight, but they didn't have enough bullets in the gun to get it done on the road against the 6-1 Cowboys. So they remain at number 19. You move on to 18. Here's the Carolina Panthers team that you had to give them some brownie points last week for going on the road and tying. They didn't win, but they didn't lose against the Cincinnati Bengals. So then you ask them, hey, can you do that again against an even better opponent in the Green Bay Packers? The answer was a resounding no. They get drubbed on the road, so they drop 5 spots from 13 all the way down to 18. They got a huge home matchup this week against the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks are struggling. Maybe they can get one on the road. Panthers are now 18th after being 13th here in the NFL Power Grid a week ago. You go on to the 17th team, and this is a team that's rising. The Miami Dolphins were 23rd last week. Now they're 17th, rising a whole 6 spots in the NFL Power Grid. Huge road victory against the Chicago Bears. Really dominated that game from start to finish. They move up all the way from 23 to 17. Dolphins move up 6 spots. A big winner in week number 7. You go on to number 16, Cincinnati Bengals. They continue their plummet and their fall from grace. This was a team that at one point was as high as number 4 on the NFL Power Rankings. Since then, they've dropped all the way down to 16 where they reside right now after another loss. And they were blanked in Indianapolis. No Young, fresh and green. No A.J. Green means no green, means no win for this Cincinnati Bengals team. They're now 16 after dropping a full 6 slots from a week ago when they were number 10 in this list. You move on to 15, it's the Steelers. We don't know what to make of this team. One week they're up, the next week they're down. Well, this week they're up after an impressive home victory versus the Texans. Again, down 13-0. They run off 24 unanswered points. End up winning that football game 30-23. So they move up 3 slots after coming in at 18 last week. They're now number 15 on the NFL Power Grid. Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs come in, and this is another huge winner in the NFL Power Grid. They move up a whole 7 slots after knocking off the number 1 team, and this team had been number 1 the last 2 weeks in the NFL Power Grid. The Chiefs go into San Diego and knock off the red-hot San Diego Chargers, and so because of that victory on the road, this Chiefs team shoots up all the way from 21 to 14. Huge win for the Kansas City Chiefs. You move on to number 13. It's the Buffalo Bills. Nobody circles the Power Grid like the Buffalo Bills, coming in at number 13, up 3 slots from a week ago where they had dropped to 16 after that tough home loss to the Patriots. They escaped at home versus the Minnesota Vikings. But hey, a win's a win's a win in this league. Doesn't matter if it's pretty or ugly. They got it done. They move up from 16 to 13, does the Buffalo Bills. You look at number 12. It's the San Francisco 49ers. Down 4 slots from that beatdown they suffered at the hands of Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos. It's no shame in losing to a team that was ranked number 2 last week in the NFL Power Grid. That's not the shame. The shame is in not showing up at all, which is what this 49ers team did on the road. Despite all the injuries, despite all the excuses you can make for this 49ers team, there's no excuse for not showing up. They were absolutely destroyed in that game, so they dropped 4 slots in the NFL Power Grid all the way down to number 12. You go to the number 11 team, another team from the NFC West. It's the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. Here's a team that at one point was as high as number 2 on the NFL Power Grid. Then they lose 2 weeks ago, and the Cowboys go into their house and were able to come out with a W, so they dropped to number 6. This week, they lose again, this time on the road to a St. Louis Rams team that knows them all too well. Here's a team struggling to find themselves right now at 3-3. The Super Bowl defending champions are now number 11, dropping 5 whole slots from 6 to 11. So they're outside of the top 10. They're no longer an elite team. They've got to get their act together. This is still a good football team, but right now they're struggling, and they need to find their way back into the elite in the NFL. Right now, they're on the outside looking in the NFL Power Grid. You go to number 10, the Detroit Lions. Look at that. Lions up 4 whole slots after their come-from-behind victory at home versus New Orleans Saints. This Detroit Lions team was literally 5 minutes away from a debilitating loss at home, but instead they had the intestinal fortitude and the mental toughness to battle through what was a grind of a football game, get it done in the waning moments, steal a victory from the jaws of defeat, and now they're reaping the benefits as they move up from 14 a week ago to number 10. So they are trying to penetrate the elite. They're playing elite level defense. If they can get the offense to match what they're doing defensively, that could be a scary team. You move on to number 9, the New England Patriots. How we forget this team played on Thursday, so you kind of out of sight, out of mind type of thing. But this is a team that got it done. It wasn't pretty, but it was family business nonetheless. They got the W versus the Jets on Thursday Night Football. They move up from 12 a week ago to number 9, so they're trying to penetrate. They're in the top 10 now. Now they're trying to penetrate that elite level, that elite 8. They're right on the outside looking in. A win this week and maybe a loss or 2 by a couple of teams in front of them could spell the New England Patriots getting into the elite 8 of the NFL Power Grid. Speaking of elite 8, here we go. We start with the number 8 team, a new entry to the elite 8. The Baltimore Ravens have been playing suffocating defense. The offense has been scoring points, and so they dominated the Atlanta Falcons en route to a 29-7 victory. Couple of losses by some teams in the elite 8, and here the Baltimore Ravens are in this group for the first time this year, and they're playing some dynamite football. They're up 3 spots from number 11, and they were at 11 the last 2 weeks, so that was a huge win at home. And a couple of losses by some other teams saw this Ravens team shoot up, and now they're in the elite group. Let's see if they can maintain that status, as they've got a tough one at home versus, or excuse me, on the road versus the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that has beaten them already this season. So that's going to be a big one for the Baltimore Ravens if they want to remain elite in the NFL Power Grid. You go to number 7, San Diego Superchargers. And this is a long drop. From number 1 all the way down to number 7, 6 spots down from a week ago. And they were holding on to the number 1 spot for the first 2 weeks. But a home loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, who were 21st last week, doesn't bode well for this San Diego Chargers team. Now, it's family business. You know how it goes. So they're not out of the Elite 8, but they're 5-2 on the season now. And with a huge road test versus the Denver Broncos, they could easily find their way out of the Elite 8 and out of the top 10 with the loss. So the Chargers have to buckle it up now. They've put themselves in a precarious situation. Now they got to dig themselves out. It's going to be tough because they're taking on a Denver Broncos team that has been lights out at home this season. And speaking of that Denver Broncos team, they've moved up again in the Power Grid, and we'll talk about them a little bit later on. So the San Diego Chargers at number 7 right now, looking to cling to this elite level spot. Going to have to do some serious work in Thursday night in week number 8 to stay among the NFL's elite in the NFL Power Grid. We go to number 6, the Indianapolis Colts. Talk about a team playing some hot football. Who's playing better than the Colts right now? Not many in this league. 5 consecutive victories, including a 27-0 blanking of the Cincinnati Bengals in week number 7. This team is absolutely getting the job done right now. And so the Indianapolis Colts, who are going on the road to play the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's a big one, okay? Going on the road against the Steelers team, you don't know what you're getting from week to week. This is a big test for them. If they can go on the road and beat the Steelers, this Colts team will probably find their way into the top 5 of the NFL Power Grid. They're right now on the outside looking in, but this is a team on the rise, up a full 3 spots from a week ago when they were number 9. They've penetrated the Elite 8. Now they're looking to penetrate the top 5. You move on to number 5 on this list. Philadelphia Eagles did not move, did not play in week number 5, so their status remains unchanged. You go to number 4, the Green Bay Packers, another hot football team. Ever since Aaron Rodgers told everybody to relax, this Packers team has been playing some extraordinary football, winners of 4 consecutive games, and they've made it look pretty easy over the last couple of weeks, with the exception of that Dolphins game a week ago. They've made it look pretty easy of late, taking care of business. This is a Packers team right now playing and having everything click on all cylinders. They're now the number 4 team in the NFL Power Grid, up from number 7 a week ago. So they've been able to penetrate the top 5. They're looking to penetrate the top 3, which is the elite of the elite. Hey, Packers right there on the door, knocking on it. Let's see if any of these top 3 teams will let them in. Speaking of which, Arizona Cardinals move up a slot from number 4 a week ago. They are your bronze medal team here in the NFL Power Grid. So your bronze star team is the Arizona Cardinals. They got a hard-fought victory over the Oakland Raiders. It was tough for 4 quarters, but they got it done 24-13. Now the Arizona Cardinals go back home and have a huge home test versus the Philadelphia Eagles, who are coming off of that bye. A matchup of 2 top 5 teams in the NFL Power Grid. Someone is leaving the top 5. Will it be this Cardinals team, or will it be the Philadelphia Eagles? We shall see next week. But the Arizona Cardinals are your bronze star team, coming in at number 3 on the NFL Power Grid. We go to number 2, your silver star team, America's team, the team with the star on the side of the helmet. It's the Dallas Cowboys. Again, I talked about the Colts playing hot football. Is anybody playing more complete football than this Dallas Cowboys team? Winners of 6 consecutive games. They hold the longest winning streak in the league right now. After the Chargers weren't able to get it done, they now hold the longest winning streak in the league at 6. And they're playing some top-notch football, able to get it done at home versus the Giants. They're at home again, and they're going to be on Monday Night Football versus the Washington Redskins. That's a very winnable game. They get that one. They could be right there at number 2, possibly number 1, depending on what the number 1 team does. Speaking of the number 1 team, your number 1 team, your gold star team on the NFL Power Grid is none other than the Peyton Manning-led Denver Broncos. This team is piping hot right now. They put up 42 points on the skull of the San Francisco 49ers. This is a team that is playing complete football. The defense is much improved from last year. They're stifling and stymieing opposing offenses. At home, they're lights out right now, and they've got a huge home test on Thursday Night Football. By far the best Thursday Night Football matchup we've had on paper. Broncos hosting the San Diego Chargers. It's an AFC West showdown with the first place spot in that division on the line. Can't wait to watch it. If the Broncos win that game, they will cement their space atop the NFL Power Grid. Should they falter, however, the Cowboys or maybe even this Arizona Cardinals team might be there waiting to pick the pieces up. So it's a very competitive group in the elite of the elite, in the top 3 of the NFL Power Grid. The Denver Broncos are your gold star number 1 team atop the NFL Power Grid. Keep in mind and remember, whether your team's hot or cold, they're up or they're down, they are somewhere to be found on the NFL's Power Grid. I thank you for joining me. See you next week.